why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm Christine Moore, and I'm Supervisor Storch Chief of Staff, and we also have Cassidy Donahue from our team that's on here that will be helping moderate this evening. She's put the links into the budget information in the chat. So if you click on the link, you can see the documents that were presented to the Board of Supervisors by the county executive yesterday. I'm just going to go over some ground rules for tonight's meeting. The meeting is being recorded. Please stay on mute during the presentations. We will be answering questions in the chat, as well as we'll be taking questions from folks when you raise your hands, but we ask that you hold your questions till the end of the presentations. We will alternate between the chat and folks that have their hands raised. This is the first budget town meeting that is being presented, and so I know that we may have folks from other areas, but would ask that we will be prioritizing questions from Mount Vernon District residents first, and can look to take questions from folks that are outside the Mount Vernon District after that. Just ask that people please be respectful. The county executive did present the budget to the Board of Supervisors yesterday, and I will turn it over to Supervisor Storch.
Well, thank you, Christine, and I appreciate all you've done to organize this, and looking forward to hearing people's comments tonight. This meeting is being done jointly with our school board member, Mateo Dunne, and I want to introduce Mateo, give him an opportunity to say a few words, and then I'm going to say a few words, and then I'm going to introduce at least one or two other people, and then we will get started.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate the opportunity to just say a quick word. I just wanted to emphasize that, there are difficult choices to be made every year. This year is a particularly difficult year. And I think as we make choices, we will be looking to strengthen our schools, which are the foundation of our local economy and quality of life, at the same time as we are doing everything we can to support our federal employees who are being affected by layoffs and other actions. So we need to make sure that we're keeping all those issues in mind as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Mateo. And I wanted to also acknowledge the meeting is being really jointly done with the South County Federation, and Wendy Henley is our president. And Wendy, thank you very much for being here. And I didn't know if you want to say a few words to acknowledge what the South County Federation.
I will. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Supervisor Storch. As the comprehensive process for the budget is underway, I just want to again thank you for hosting this budget town hall meeting, this budget meeting in collaboration with the South County Federation. This meeting presents a valuable platform for engaging our community, fostering dialogue, and gathering important insights that will shape our budgetary priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. So thank you once again for facilitating this important event.
Thank you again, Wendy, for sponsoring that with Mateo and I. We have a couple comments I'll make, and then I'm going to turn and introduce our two county representatives, and then they will present, and then I will introduce, then say hello to, or turn it over to Mateo, and then he can introduce the school folks. They'll present, and then after those two presentations are over, and hopefully we'll be done around 7:40, 7:45 with those presentations, we will then take questions for about 45 minutes until 8:30. So with that, I know we just had the budget presented to us yesterday. I do not know what the budget was until yesterday. It's an internal process, and Joe LaHate is going to kind of walk through what they do and how they got to where they are today, as well as for the board itself. We've just truly started the process yesterday with the presentation by the county executive. We will have a number of committee meetings. We will have a number of sessions like this one with other communities all around the county. And then we will have our open, really anybody is welcome to come and present to us either via in person or by phone, or even send us a video link and we can watch that. So a lot of different ways to get involved, which is a lot different than it used to be. And I'm very proud to have played a role in kind of increasing the ability of folks to join us. And it's a tough budget year, absolutely. We always have challenges. This year is more than most because, from my perspective, at least, our school funding at the state level is still grossly inadequate, and we need changes there, and we need to try to see if we make a difference there. And you'll hear what Jill Hay will be presenting with respect to the county executive's budget, kind of what those challenges are. And then the board now needs to take a look at that and see if we agree or disagree and how we need to adjust it. And then in mid-May, we basically will be approving the final budget for the county at that time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe LaHate, and Joe's here with Katie Hortzman, who are both our Travis County budget folks. And Joe, thank you. Welcome. You're a veteran of all these things, so in these meetings. I'm sure you'll serve us well. And if I need to get involved with a particular question or something, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Supervisor Stork, and School Board Member Dunne as well. Obviously, Katie's with me. We synced it up to have the exact same background, but please understand we are by no means on vacation. We have been working tirelessly the last several months to put the budget together, which I think you all saw yesterday or got links to from the county executive. We've got a short presentation, some abbreviated slides that Mr. Hill did yesterday that we'll cover. I'll take the first half, Katie will take the second half, and then we'll hand the baton over to Alice and or Matthew for the schools portion. So with that said, we'll give it a go and kick off some of the highlights of the slides here. I'm just moving this to a bigger screen.
The screen,
yep.
The advertised budget presentation.
Good to go.
Good to go. Thank you.
Yep. All set.
Sorry, it doesn't let me advance on my screen. Oh, sorry. I did test this.
You might be able to click that arrow on the bottom right.
Okay, let me try again. Let me just make sure it's working before we. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
All righty. Thanks, Katie. Yep. So I think this slide really kind of gives it probably the executive summary of what goes into our roughly $7 billion budget. Real estate tax base, I think, as you all know, property owners, commercial as well as residential really is our largest portion of the revenue pie. All in all, we've got about a 5.3% growth this year compared to last year. We're seeing strong gains continuously in the residential side, but we're seeing some lagging growth on the commercial side, otherwise known as non-residential. The revenues that we generated this year based on trends and projections over last year, we have split evenly with the schools. So whatever that roughly was, we're taking half and we're giving the remaining half to them. Lee, Alice, and Matthew will provide a little more insight with that later on. Obviously, some of you know we now have entered the collective bargaining arena with our employees. We have two groups, firefighters and police, as referenced there by the IAFF and SSPBA. We have fully funded the compensation program requirements to them, which is based off of agreements that our board signed off on back in December of 2023. We have an additional quarter penny, roughly $8.5 million going towards affordable housing. If you've listened to any county board meeting, that is, if not one of the top priorities to add additional housing units by 2034, 10,000 units to be exact is our goal. Adding this money helps us get there and make further progress in that. Probably the most notable item that you'll see in this presentation is the current tax rate right now in FY25 is $1.12.5. We have proposed a 1.5 cent increase to that tax rate to put it at $1.14 as part of what is right now the FY26 advertised budget plan. In addition, just in terms of us trying to generate additional revenue and reviewing all available sources right now that we have to our discretion and ability, the transit occupancy tax, otherwise known as the hotel tax, we have proposed to increase that by 2 percentage points from the current rate of 4% to a proposed revised rate of 6%. Also, it probably wasn't long last year, right after we adopted our 25 adopted budget, we set forward looking at revenue forecasting and realized that we were going to have some tough year ahead of us. So we spent pretty much all summer, and Katie was the architect behind this in terms of putting together and coordinating reductions from all county departments who receive general fund support. That's a combination of position elimination, as well as Just looking at all services that they do, they were asked for 10% cuts. We did not take all of it, but the net number we have here is 60 million is what we put forward to offset and balance this budget, as you'll see. So again, kind of the executive summary. And then we'll head off to the next slide. Okay, so every year we look at revenue growth, again, driven primarily by our real estate values, residential and commercial, other local taxes, sales tax, business licenses, and other various categories. We don't get a whole lot of money from the state and federal government, but we get some. All these combined, you can see through the years. We had some low points here, and it's probably no doubt to be expected in 2021 when the pandemic hit us pretty hard. So it took us a couple of years to grow back. You can see we came back pretty strong in 22 and 23 respectively, 3.5% and 7.3% growth. For the current year we're in right now, FY26, and we're about to enter, we've got about 3.2% growth overall. And again, when you add that 1.5 cent increase on the tax rate, we're at about 4.2%. I think generally speaking, through the years, we forecast probably anywhere between 2 and 3% growth for revenues. Anything beyond that, we believe, is just overly optimistic. So we're trying to be conservative, at the same time realistic. We like this slide because it just gives kind of a good glimpse of what we've got in the last several years, where we think we are going forward. And note, we were on the receiving end of a significant amount of stimulus funds in 2020, 21, and 22, but we excluded them from this chart just to kind of keep it apples to apple for all true core county revenues. And on the next slide, kind of what goes into that, what are our big hitters here? Like I said before, it's to no surprise, real estate really is the largest piece here. We've got projected 5.4% growth in 25 and about another 6.5% growth overall in 26. Personal property, otherwise known as your car tax, and within the business world, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Obviously, the lesser slice of that pie, again, predominantly car piece related. In some of the last couple of years, we did see significant growth in that category. I think you all can recall the market out there for used cars when the pandemic hit drove some of those values up significantly to unprecedented levels. We have seen a reset of some of those pieces and a recalibration of sorts. And we also did provide some adjustments to market value ratios to try to give the average personal property taxpayer a little bit of relief in the years of 2023, 2024. But we are back at 100% market value in terms of how those car values are assessed. In terms of how things work in the local economy, I think we look at two factors. What are people doing in terms of spending? Sales tax, that's probably the most consistent category we get every month to kind of see how the trends are looking. Fairly modest in terms of 25, 1.3% growth, and then only about a 2% growth next year in FY26. Again, I think you saw people kind of dialing back in 21, but in 2022, you saw a huge bump there, 15.1% growth. Suffice to say, as much as the pandemic was in full effect, that did not curtail online spending. That was one of the big categories we saw there. Again, BPOL, otherwise known as business licenses, in terms of how the county's business community is doing. We don't get those numbers typically until about the end of March, so we have a tough time projecting those on an annual basis, but they do make up a pretty good core of funding for us. Lastly, you can see the direct correlation here. Interest income, what do we get in terms of investment on all the county funding balances on a month-to-month basis? You don't have to go that far back in 2021 when interest rates were incredibly low, only bringing in about $23 million. As the Fed increased those rates over the course of the next couple of years, you can see the direct correlation to our ability to gain so much more dollar-wise on that. Given in terms of where we expect the Fed to continue to grow, we've dialed back that number, which you can see is reflected in about a 13.6% decrease over some of the prior fiscal years. So we're just trying to get an updated projection in terms of where we think we're going to get on the county's investment portfolio. Still significant in terms of $150 million, but definitely dialed back to the tune of about $24-25 million over some of the prior fiscal years. But all in, about 4.2% growth we're projecting in FY26. On the next slide, what we do here really is just give a little more breakdown. Again, real estate is roughly about 66% of the revenues that we generate in our budget. A penny on the tax rate, which is commonly referred to in terms of projections, estimates, ideas, generates just under $34 million. The challenge we have right now is the continued growth in terms of the residential market. The average property owner right now is about 6.17% in FY26. So coupled with a 1.5% increase, 1.5 cent increase in the tax rate, the average tax bill on a homeowner would go up by about $638. The growth in the residential side, coupled with the lag in the commercial side, you can see on the commercial side, it's going down from what's currently about 15.6% to about 14.8%. Our goal would be to get that really in the high teens / low 20%, but we've definitely had some challenges the last couple of years. As the next couple of slides will give you a little bit of background and insight into that. On slide 6, we look at this page as almost kind of a one-page snapshot. If you say that in FY25, you've got roughly about a 5.4 and change billion dollar county budget. We're projecting to generate about another $263 million in revenues. And this essentially shows the incremental bumps by categories in terms of where these funds go. So like I said, you can kind of just follow down the left for sort of a high-level version. County priorities are mainly paying the bills, debt service, utilities, and funding employee compensation. We send over $125 million to the schools, what we refer to as the transfer, for both operating as well as debt service support. We've got that additional investment in affordable housing to about $8.5 million. We did bump the TOT tax, the hotel tax, and we've kept a little bit of that in reserve for tourism-related promotional purposes. And in terms of where things stand right now, there is a balance of approximately $5.6 million for the board's consideration of ideas that they may want to use as we progress through the budget process. But again, this is barely even mile one of a very long marathon of 3 months. So there's still a lot of time for public consideration, board feedback, and insight. The schools continue to be the largest share of county disbursements at about 51.5% of disbursements. And then heavily on our minds as far as adherence to the bond rating agencies in New York. We hold our reserves at 10% of general fund disbursements. On the slide here, on the 26 requirements, we'll show detailed breakouts for each of those categories just to give you a little more insight in terms of what those things mean. Some of them may be self-explanatory and some of them may require a little bit more information, but I think we've got those that follow. So on the next slide here, again, Alice and Matthew will provide a little more context on this. Superintendent Reed proposed her budget roughly about, I think, a little less than a month ago. I believe the school board will review it this week. Dr. Reed had asked for roughly about a $268 million increase in the transfer from the county to meet their operating needs. The county executive's budget yesterday, as advertised, gives a little bit less than half of that, about $119 million. As you can see, there's state revenue pieces that get built into the school piece. I think the challenge here was how much more, how much could we do? That variance, the difference between what Mr. Hill put out there versus what the superintendent asked for, is about $150 million. And that would have been about another 4.5 cent increase on the real estate tax rate beyond the 1.5 cents that we already had built into his budget. So that unfortunately was not funded. In terms of debt service, it goes towards the ongoing construction purposes of all things school facilities and buildings. Again, that's the highlight of the school piece, but I'll let obviously the school staff speak to that further, but just some quick snapshots there. And on slide 8, the second largest category after we send things over to the schools for their operating debt service needs really is the county compensation piece. Again, for all county employees not in a union, we've essentially transferred over to a cost of living adjustment, which is a flat 2% increase to all employees at the beginning of the fiscal year, coupled with what we talk about performance reviews on an annual basis, longevities, if they're eligible based on the number of years they've been with the county. And at the same time, the latter two components here for collective bargaining purposes, agreements that were reached in December 2023, signed off by the Board of Supervisors for a 3-year period. It funds all the provisions in those two respective contracts, IAFF, otherwise known as the firefighters, and SSPBA, otherwise known as the police officers. The last piece that ties in with the compensation is the obvious corresponding notion of fringe benefits, healthcare, and the related pieces, coupled with increases that we are required to put in for contribution rates towards the county's retirement plans for police, fire, and the county union, and the county employees, excuse me. Thanks. And then kind of taking a switch from all things operating into the world of capital and bonds. If you vote in the fall, obviously you've got elected officials to vote up for. At the same time, you will probably see a question on the ballot in terms of whether or not you want to vote yay or nay for county and or school funding for bond purposes to fund the various capital facilities of the respective school and county sides. How we've pretty much done it is in the odd number years, we put schools questions on the ballot. In the even numbered years, we put county questions on the ballot. This lays out the plan over the course of the next couple of years for the schools as well as the county. In terms of the net increase in total debt service costs for the debt that we have, plus the additional debt we sold this past January, we did a $400 million deal. Given where rates are, this is where things are market-wise. We sold at about 3.57% for an interest rate. That's leverages the county's AAA bond rating to get the best that we can. No different than having a good credit score, helps you get a better mortgage and or refi. And these numbers in terms of 170 million for the county and 230 million for the schools is based off a joint committee that was done a couple of years ago. But that pretty much is the long and short of it there. And then Katie, I believe I hand off to you at this point.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so now I'm going to pick up and talk a little bit more and give some more detail on some of our disbursement requirements. We're going to start with affordable housing. Budget guidance over the last 3 years or so has directed the county executive to increase our baseline funding available for affordable housing. And the goal is to reach 2 pennies on the real estate tax rate by fiscal year 2027. So this was a gradual phased-in approach, recognizing that getting to 2 pennies in 1 year would be difficult, just given how much funding that would require. This goal was established in our budget guidance to reach the 10,000 new affordable units by the year 2034, which is a goal that the board set several years ago. So in 2023, we were able to reach the equivalent of 1 penny on the real estate tax rate, but since that time, we haven't made much baseline progress. So we haven't been able to add any baseline funding since that penny went in 2023. Now we have added one-time funding. We've added 97 million in one-time funding, and that was a combination between federal stimulus dollars that we got, and that was $55 million, and then $42 million in county funds, or our general funds. So there has been significant resources added. Again, 97 million, but unfortunately, it just hasn't been added to our baseline. But as part of this proposal, the county executive was able to add an additional quarter penny, and that translates to about $8.5 million. So all in, will be at a penny and a quarter, or $42.4 million. Now, that leaves us about $25 million to go. And again, we had a goal of getting there by 2027. That will be challenging, just given our projected fiscal reality next year. We're not expecting significant increase in our revenue picture, but it is something that we are still striving for. Okay, so for new facilities, we had a number of new facilities that are coming online in 2026. We have our Kingstown complex, which is actually a co-located facility, and that will have the police station, the Franconia District Supervisor's Office, a museum, an active adult center, a new child care center, and then the Kingstown Library. So most of the funding is already in the baseline because these are programs and services that are ongoing, but we do have the active adult center, which is doubling in size. So we did need to add some funding there in 3 positions, and the Kingstown Library. That's also moving from a community branch to a regional branch. So we did need to add some resources there as well. There is a new child care center. So that will serve 78 children ages birth to 5. So all in, we have 5 new positions. And Joe mentioned at the beginning, we have a total of 9 new positions in this budget. 5 of them are associated with new facilities. The other 4 are some resources we needed in our retirement agency, given the number of employees that are retiring and workload requirements there. There was no general fund support needed. They're a self-sustaining fund. So no new resources there. And then we had 2 in our circuit court and records. There was a new state mandate that came out that takes effect on July 1st. So in order to meet that state mandate, we needed to add 2 positions. So of all of the positions, all 9 positions that were added this year, all of them were either mandate, an increased workload with no impact to the general fund, or associated with the new facilities. We also have our Fair Ridge Family Shelter. which is scheduled to open actually in April of this year. But we needed to add funding for the operations, full year funding for the operation of that facility come July 1st. Our other adjustments totaled just under $41 million. And they were all things that were critical to our county operations. We really don't have any new or expanded programming as part of this budget. And they really fall into four categories. First, we have our inflation and contract rate adjustments, which total $16.2 million. And similar to what other businesses are seeing and what other homeowners are seeing, we've seen significant inflation, and that causes our costs to increase. So our contracts for things like body-worn cameras, our veterinary services at our animal shelter, and then probably our biggest category is our support for our nonprofits. They've seen significant increases as well. We also have $10.6 million in our information technology. And this is, $5 million of this is to support our IT architecture, which is a really kind of our structure within the county. And then as our IT projects are completed and implemented, what we're seeing now is we're moving towards a license base. So that's a yearly fee to operate our systems rather than a one-time fee that might last, 5 years or 10 years or until we wanted to upgrade it. So in order to support those new IT systems that are coming online, we did need to add resources for those licensing component. We have almost $10.2 million in our Costa County operations. And this is going to include things like our lease escalations. We have increased fuel, security at our public library. We have some costs related to moving our Rec Pack summer program over to Camp Fairfax in order to make to accommodate those kids who are coming over from Rec Pack and providing them meals, breakfast, lunch, and then a snack during the day. We had to add funding there as well. And then finally, that last category on there, $3.8 million. Many of these were actions that the board took as part of carryover, and we just needed to add the baseline funding. And they are from federal or state mandates or expiring grant funding. So we have our fire and rescue department has to stand up their own pharmacy as a result of a change from the feds. We had to replace some of our VOCA grant funding, which supports victims of domestic and sexual violence. And then we had some positions in the Office of the Commonwealth's Attorney as well. And then, like Joe mentioned, we did offset. So all of, outside of our compensation, all of the increases were offset by the reductions that we took. So we identified almost $60 million in reductions, and it's a total of 208 positions. And as Joe mentioned, at the start of when we finished last year's budget and we're looking towards this year's budget, the county executive saw that we weren't expecting significant increase in our revenue. So he did direct agency directors to identify 10% of their budgets as a possible reduction. So they submitted those to the Department of Management and Budget, and throughout the late summer, fall, and into early winter, we spent a lot of time going over all those reductions and came forward with, again, almost $60 million. It totals about 3.4% on average. That's an average. So some agencies might be more, some agencies might be less. Every county agency that's general fund or general fund supported did take an agency reduction. But again, that it's a 3.4% average across the agencies. That's also coupled with the fact that in 2024, we had a $6.3 million across the board reduction. And then last year we had just over $34 million in reductions. And those were targeted and really more efficiencies and cost savings that we saw last year. So the last 3 fiscal years, we've taken almost $100 million in reductions on the county side. It does include 208 merit positions. Less than half of those positions are currently filled. When we do have a filled position, that does require, the county executive has declared that he will be implementing a reduction in force or a RIF. The county over the years, though, has done a really good job of making sure that we can place all of those individuals into other county positions. So the hope and the intent is that no one loses their job, that if the program or service that they're working on is eliminated, that they're given an opportunity someplace in the county to continue their employment. So in addition to our disbursements and reductions, when we finished last year's budget, the board was also interested in any revenue diversification that we could look at. So last September, staff presented information to the board. Unfortunately, we have limited options when it comes to diversifying our revenue because we are a Dillon state. So we're not allowed to just implement whatever we want. We have to get that authority from the state before we can move forward. One of the things that was discussed in some detail was the food and beverage tax. That is not included in the advertised budget. So it was put forth by the county executive as something that the board could take action on if they were to choose. If the board did decide to go forward with the food and beverage tax, we could not implement it until January of 2026. So that's about half year. So the funding that we would be picking up in 2026 is a half year funding. We would then see the full year funding the following year. So a 3% food and beverage tax will net us $48 million. And if the board decided that could eliminate the real estate tax rate increase, or they could do other things with, they could restore reductions, they could provide additional support in other areas that they were interested in funding. And a 4% tax rate or 4% tax would generate just over $65 million. And again, that could be used for to reduce the real estate tax rate, in this case by half a cent from the current rate, or 2 cents from the proposed rate. Both of our revenue projections, I should point out, include an assumed 3% dealer discount. So that's already taken into account. And one of the things about the food and beverage tax is it doesn't just hit county residents. It's estimated that about 34% of the revenue generated from the food and beverage tax would be from non-county residents. So that is one of the things that is appealing to the food and beverage tax. So looking forward, we're obviously going to continue to monitor our revenue, our major revenue categories. The General Assembly is scheduled to wrap up their session at the end of this week. So we'll be taking or monitoring their actions that they take. It is unclear whether they will be done with their budget or not. The last couple of years, they have not finished when the session has ended. So we'll have to wait and see whether that holds true for this year as well. In April, we submit an add-on package. So the add-on package is any changes that the board would like to make to the proposed budget, and or if we have any updates to revenue projections, we can also pick those up at that time. We have 3 upcoming budget committee meetings, one on February 25th, and that's a joint meeting between the board and the school board. And then we have 2 more on March 11th and then March 25th. So the county executive has recommended that the board advertise the maximum real estate tax rate. So that means whatever tax rate the board chooses to go forward with, they can't implement something higher than that. So that's key, that whatever they advertise means the rate won't be higher, but that certainly doesn't mean that will be the rate. They have the option to lower that rate as well. And he's also recommending to increase the transient occupancy tax. So both of those will be on March 18th is when those will go forward. Typically, if anyone's familiar with our process, we usually have 2 weeks before we have to advertise our rates. So normally that would be March 4th. Last year, the legislation coming out of Richmond changed that we no longer have to give a 30-day public notice. We now only need a 7-day. So that actually gives the board more time to really have the thoughtful discussions with the community and to hear from folks before they go forward with what rate they want to advertise. The county executive also did recommend just to have as a discussion point that food and beverage tax. Again, that doesn't mean it's going to be implemented, but in order to move forward with that, we do need to have public hearings. And so that does need to be part of the discussion. So there's a lot to for the board to really consider as part of this budget, but advertising anything on March 18th doesn't mean that's what they're going to do. It just allows them to have that discussion. And then how to provide input. We obviously have email, phone, online, or text options. Our public hearings are in April. April 22nd through the 24th. If you do want to participate in the public hearing process, you do need to sign up, but that can be in person, by video, or phone. But you do need to contact the clerk's office in order to be part of that process. The budget and our CRP program is online. You can see the website there. Anyone who's interested. And then here is our last slide, which just goes over our timing. Obviously, like I said, the joint meeting with the board and school board is on the 25th. Public hearings the 22nd through the 24th, and then budget adoption on the 13th. So those are sort of the key dates and takeaways.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much. And I appreciate your presentation. And I want to move quickly on to give everybody more time. But I want to first thank Cassie Donahue on my staff who's here, just recognize her and her work with our team. As well as I know Phil Hagan was on earlier. He's the director of our Fairfax County Management and Department of Management and Budget. So I don't know if Phil's still here. If you are, you can. Good evening. There you go. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. And if you want to say anything, that's great. Otherwise, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mateo Dunne so we can introduce the school staff.
I'll be happy to let the meeting keep going. I think Katie and Joe did a great job. So thank you.
I agree. Thanks, Phil. Mateo, it's all yours, sir.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for an excellent presentation to the county staff. I'm here to introduce Ms. Lee Burton, the CFO, who will not be presenting the presentation tonight, but instead it will be the Budget Director, Alex Wigington, supported by Matthew Norton. And I also just wanted to note that beyond the challenging budget environment, the layoffs, et cetera, the uncertainty of the coming months, the commercial office collapse that is ongoing, the continued underfunding by the state, $568 million a year, according to JLARC, and the continued underfunding by the federal government, which only funds a fraction of the 40% of the additional cost of special education that they committed to decades ago. So all those reasons mean that Fairfax County taxpayers, residents, have to pick up more of the cost, and that's unfair to residents of Fairfax County, especially as the demographics of our county, of our school system have changed, require more investment to ensure that every child receives a world-class education, which is my goal, and I know is shared by Dan and the entire school board and board of supervisors. So with that, Alice, please go ahead.
Mr. Dunne, hopefully everyone can hear me. I was having video problems earlier, so Matthew should be sharing our presentation here in a moment. What you're going to find is that this presentation just represents select slides from our proposed budget presentation that was delivered by Dr. Reed in January. Detailed information can be found on FCPS's website at our budget documents, a landing page of all the documents and documents from all of our work sessions. You'll see on this slide that this budget is focusing on our competitive compensation. It addresses changes in our student enrollment and student needs. It continues to invest in our multi-year initiatives and also provide some differentiated learning credentials for our teachers. On the next slide, you'll see that our FY26 proposed budget totals $4 billion, and that is an increase of $297 million over our current year's budget. To support these investments, as you heard, FCPS requested an additional $268 million, or 10.4% increase from our County Board of Supervisors. As you'll see on the next slide, this year's budget really does prioritize investments for employee compensation. This signals our commitment to keeping our salaries competitive in the region and addresses our importance of attracting new talent and retaining experienced employees. Our compensation adjustments reflect a net increase of over $213 million, and that represents approximately 72% of the overall budget increase. Funding of $240 million is to meet our commitment towards our collective bargaining agreement, and providing those competitive salaries and benefits is essential for recruiting and retaining our talented educators. We have a little more than $5 million, and that's also related to our retirement rate changes for FCERS and ERFC. And then each year, as part of our compensation adjustments, we offset our compensation with accounts with base savings, which accounts for recurring savings that's due to position turnover. Our savings are realized when our experienced employees retire or leave our system. Our baseline adjustments, that total reflects a little more than $65 million, and that represents baseline funding for previously approved adjustments that were primarily recurring costs that were part of a quarterly fund review or other baseline adjustments. Some of those adjustments include funding for our substitute teacher incentive, funding to provide additional day for our middle school late buses, and it also provided esports stipends for our fall and spring season at all of our 25 high schools. The next major adjustment in this category includes funding of $20 million for enrollment adjustments in the form of additional staffing that's directed to our schools. This funding primarily supports the increased need for our special education services, and that was offset by a decrease in our overall projected enrollment. As a percentage of projected enrollment, we have about 37% of our students that are eligible for free and reduced price meals. 20.8% are projected to receive multilingual learner services, and a little more than 17% are projected to receive special education services. So when you combine compensation and our enrollment adjustments, that is nearly 79% of our total budget increase. And then similar to the county, we also have inflationary increases and cost escalations for our negotiated contracts. There's about $12.9 million in funding, and that's primarily to support our continued enhancement of our summer programs and addressing some of our major maintenance, and then just a slight adjustment in the transfer that covers the lease payment for our debt service. Our identified investments category represents a little more than $14 million. And with these investments, there are expenditures that are related to support safety and security in our schools, as well as differentiated learning credentials for our teachers. Our multi-year investments represents initiatives that are being implemented through a phased approach. Some of these happened 3 to 4 years ago is when they began, and this category totals $4 million. I'll just highlight a few in this category, with the first one being funding of $2 million to support our inclusive preschool expansion, and that fosters the development and well-being of all of our preschool students. We have about $0.7 million to expand our fine and performing arts stipends in support of our middle school theater and musicals, our high school one-act plays, indoor drumline, and our indoor color guard. These investments recognize the responsibilities that are related to our fine and performing arts. And then we have the third year of a 5-year plan to support an additional certified athletic trainer at each of our 25 high schools. And at the completion of this particular plan, there will be 2 certified athletic trainers at each of our high schools. On the next slide, you'll see that there's a comparison of our current master's lane. Salaries for our surrounding school systems are shown here as compared to Fairfax County. Our compensation philosophy stems from a 2016 market study that aspired to maintain 95 to 105% of our market at the midpoint. And as of the current year, we have fallen just outside that window for the midpoint, and we're a little further away at the market max. Our ranking compared to other divisions is less than ideal at all 3 of those areas, with Fairfax ranking 5th of 8 at the market min, but 7th of 8 at the market mid and max. The next slide shows a comparison of what the master's lane beginning salary is for the current year and a projection of the proposed salaries based on what we have seen surrounding jurisdictions have done in terms of the release of their budget. And so after factoring in the 7% increase that's included in the collective bargaining agreement, we anticipate that our ranking for beginning teacher salary on the master's lane will improve from 5th to 2nd in the region. Moving on to the next slide, our projected revenue for the school operating fund totals $4 billion. And as I mentioned earlier, most of that was a requested county transfer increase of about $268 million. As Joe stated on February 18th, the county executive presented his budget and recommended a transfer of $118.6 million, which was about $149.6 million less than what was requested. Our next funding or revenue category is our state revenue, and that's projected to increase by about $23 million, and that's based on the governor's budget. And that's due to technical updates to our direct aid programs. We had increases in our English language learner funding that's based on updated student proficiency data, and it also included the state's share of a 3% compensation supplement. On Sunday, February the 2nd, the House and the Senate each released their amendments to the governor's proposed budget. There are a number of similarities between both chambers, which included maintaining VPI funding that the governor had reduced. It included funding to remove the cap on support positions, and it provided a per pupil add-on for our special education. We also had a technical correction to FCPS for our early intervention reading initiative. So there was an error in the governor's budget, and so they have corrected that in both the House and the Senate's proposals. And so while both chambers also included a one-time $1,000 bonus for SOQ funded positions, the Senate calls for that bonus to be provided in the current year in FY25, while the House would provide that bonus in FY26. And both of those would come with additional expenditure requirements to FCPS at approximately $17 million. As Katie kind of alluded to, the General Assembly still has their work to be done, and they have until February 20th to put bills into a conference committee with final action on legislation by Saturday, February the 22nd. The governor can sign, amend, or veto any bill, and the governor has until March the 24th to take such actions. The General Assembly will return for a one-day reconvened session on Wednesday, April the 2nd to consider the governor's actions. The next funding category is our federal aid, and that's projected to decrease by $1 million. And that's based on current federal awards for our Perkins grant as well as our IDEA grant awards. We will continue to monitor the actions at the federal level to determine if there are any other updates that are needed on our revenue projections as necessary. And then finally, our other revenue represents an increase of about $6.7 million, and that's primarily related to the tuition to Fairfax City Schools, and then a slight increase in the tuition that we're anticipating for TJ. And then the next key dates that you'll see is that we have the adoption of our advertised budget, which is scheduled for the school board tomorrow night on February 20th. And then we also have a link so that you can get to our full budget calendar on our website. And at this time, I am going to turn it back over to either Christine or Supervisor Stork.
Well, thank you. Mateo, did you want to add anything to what you presented? And otherwise, we can just go to Q&A.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that remaining competitive with surrounding jurisdictions in terms of pay for teachers, pay for staff, especially school-based staff, everyone from school bus drivers and cafeteria workers to principals and school counselors is absolutely vital. Being able to ensure that the folks who support the quality of life, the quality of our local public schools can also afford to live in our county and enjoy that quality of life and enjoy the benefits of their hard work is absolutely vital, not just to our public schools and the quality of our education, but also to equitable future for our children, our community, and being able to attract the best and brightest to work in our schools and retain them. So that is a focus of this budget, and I think will continue to be a priority in the coming years, especially with inflation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mateo. And we're going to move to questions, and we'll start first with folks who've raised their hands. But just to remind folks, we're going to prioritize folks that are in the Mount Vernon district. Hopefully we'll have time to get to all the questions, but that would be our major focus. And we have another budget meeting. If this one proves you want more or need more, we have another budget meeting next Tuesday, 7 o'clock on the 25th, and you're welcome to join us there. And there are others, virtual meetings around the county that I think are posted online. And I don't know if Joe or Phil or somebody wants to chime in to kind of identify what those are, where to go, that maybe that's just, or put it in the chat, maybe is a better way to do it. How they can access other budget meetings if they didn't get to this one and they want to come to one that's more convenient for them, they can do that. So, and Christine, did you want to moderate the QAs? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
happy to do that.
I'm here
First
to
hand
listen,
up
and
is
I'll be available. So
Supervisor Stork, just to chime in on that, the chat, the link that Cassidy put into the chat for ways to give feedback. On that page, there is a link to the page where we have linked all the other supervisors' town halls, as well as your second one. So it'd be the way to find it.
great. Thank you, Phil. We'll go ahead and start with Maura Keeney. Maura, unmute you. Actually, you'll need to unmute yourself if you can, please.
I can. Hello.
There
can
you go.
Me?
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I
Thank
didn't
you.
expect to be first. So I am a resident of Mount Vernon District. I am the parent of a 6th grader in FCPS, and I am also a school librarian here at our public schools. And I just want to express my deep concern and profound disappointment that the collective bargaining agreements for the police and firefighters have been honored in this budget, but the collective bargaining agreement negotiated with your teachers here in Fairfax County has been completely underfunded. We have been locked in our steps, not getting the step increases that we were promised over the years, frozen again and again. And now we finally had the power to negotiate a contract that we believe is best for all of our students, because we believe retaining great teachers is best for our whole county. And so I appreciated that the school board presentation included how fully funding the school board's request would increase where we are in terms of our rankings, but the county budget as presented here tonight does not provide that. For somebody at my stage in my career, I've been teaching for more than 20 years now, we're like $30,000 a year below where Prince William County is. And Fairfax has been able to get away with that for many years because a lot of neighboring districts wouldn't give us credit for all of our years of experience. But with the massive teacher shortages, a lot of neighboring districts are giving full credit. So I could move over, I live in Lorton, I could go teach in Occoquan and literally get a $30,000 raise at where I am on the contract. I don't want to do that. I'm a loyal FCPS person, mostly because I'm an FCPS resident, and my kid goes to school here, and I care about our schools. But I mean, I have just seen we're bleeding great teachers. We're bleeding great teachers to early retirement because our class sizes are so huge. We're being micromanaged unbelievably. And we're just again and again, our healthcare costs are increasing. We're not getting step increases. We're not where we're promised at the beginning of our careers that would be according to the steps because they've been frozen so many times. And to see our county prioritize one group of public service professionals or two groups of public service professionals, and again, shortchange teachers after all we've done and after all the additional pressure that's been put on us the past few years, it's just heartbreaking and disappointing. And I feel like it's being a little bit glossed over in the presentation of this budget. You're basically saying, nah, teachers, deal with it. You're not getting it again.
Ms. Keeney, do you have a specific question for Mr. Dunne or
Yeah,
FCPS
so my question,
staff?
I guess, would be for our staff or for Supervisor Stork is how can you justify fully funding the negotiated contracts with firefighters and police and not fully fund teachers? How can you justify that?
If that's for Mr. Dunne or Supervisor Stork.
it's first off, this is the county executive's budget. It's not Dan Stork's budget or the Board of Supervisors budget. So I would start with that. Secondly, I mean, I didn't negotiate whatever it is has been negotiated with the teachers. So that's a question that Mr. Dunne and the school board need to address. What's been presented to us is the county executive's assessment of what we can afford. He put on the table a number of cuts that are over the last many years that I think are significant and real. And we're gonna have to weigh those because I don't know if all those cuts will be ones that the board will support. And we'll have to take a look at the funding. But as we all know, the real issue here, frankly, the real challenge here is all of us to get the funding that we must get from the state. We're treated totally unfair. I mean, as Mateo mentioned, and I know as people have heard me say, if we just got funded the average of what other states in the country get from their state government, it would mean $600 million, almost $600 million more from the state. That $600 million is more than enough to address a lot of these issues. Or if we didn't spend it on schools, it's for our county taxpayers, it could theoretically mean a $1,300 decrease in their property tax rate. So we got major challenges. We have needs and wants that people have, and how do we pay for them is what we all are challenged to try to figure out. And that's really what we'll be, I know what I'll be listening for, what we'll be taking a look at as we go through the process.
Do you mind if I say something about this, Dan?
No, that was just my comments. You're please welcome, pick your own. Yep.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service to the community as a FCPS teacher and FCPS family. I will just say I've been COO for a $2 billion organization. I've been executive in the private and public sector, and I can say, in my experience, that the compensation structure that we have in FCPS is outdated. I don't have all the data that I would like to have. What I don't know is in Prince William County Public Schools, how many teachers actually earn that maximum salary that's $30,000 more. I can say, because I have the data, that right now we have, something like around 900 teachers who are earning at the top of, step 25 of the pay scale based on the different lanes, right? What would that look like if we increase the maximum, which I would support? But we're also in a state where, because of collective bargaining, which I do support, so teachers and staff can be partners in the educational mission, it's subject to collective bargaining. So it's up to the teachers, unions, the unions generally, and the superintendent to come together to establish a compensation structure that's more aligned with the market. I believe we do need to increase the maximum. I think we do need to make sure every year you get a step increase if you're supposed to get one. In the federal government, you always do. There are never years you skip step increases because the federal government runs out of money. So I'm not sure why we're not governing our finances better so that people are paid what they're expected to be paid and promised to be paid. It is possible to align expectations with our fiscal realities, but that speaks to something that's been happening for decades and that needs to be fixed. But again, that's outside of my control as a school board member. That's something that has to be performed in collaboration between the unions and the superintendent.
But just to be clear, we have a collective bargaining agreement. We have gone through that process with the union and the superintendent this year. We have come to an agreement. There's a price tag attached to that agreement, but this proposed budget is saying, nah, we're not going to fund that. And I just don't understand how it could be funded for firefighters and police, which I fully support, but not funded for teachers.
So Mateo, I'm going to interrupt for just a second. We have 6 other folks that have their hands up. So I would just ask, I know Ms. Keeney, we have your, you're good. I know we have your contact information. We'll put our email in the chat as well as Mr. Dunne's email as well. So if you want to connect with him directly to get more information, I think that would be great. Next, we have Sarah Robles, and I would ask if folks can Please keep your questions concise so that we could try to get to everybody tonight. We would appreciate it. Thank you. Sarah?
Hi, my name is Sarah Robles. I'm a Mount Vernon resident homeowner. I'm a Fairfax County teacher, and my mother was also a Fairfax County teacher, and she is a resident of the Mount Vernon area. She is retired. I would like to echo the statements of the previous speaker, saying that I'm extremely disappointed as a resident of the Mount Vernon district, as a former FCPS student, and as a current employee of FCPS, that our county executive's budget is not fully funding our schools. Mr. Stork, you were a member of our school board, and you know how important it is for our schools to be funded. And I'm wondering what you will do to advocate for fully funding our school budget and making sure that you show up for teachers who voted for you and who live in your district.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your service. And as you know, or may not know, my wife was a FCPS employee for a couple decades as well. So I'm obviously a deep believer, strong supporter of schools, but it is a process. It is a dialogue. The Board of Supervisors, we have our responsibilities, which is to try to balance the competing needs of the community, taxation, schools, police, et cetera. And the county executive has initiated that process with the budget that you see in front of you. I think it's going to be a difficult process, and I'm not sure how we get to the funding requests that the superintendent made. In fact, it's the highest that I've ever seen of a superintendent. I'm saying that mostly because that's part of how do you kind of square the circle or circle the square or whatever. In other words, how do you fit these things together? And that will be the conversation, the process. But I also know that our property tax rate is the highest in the area, and I have deep concerns about increasing that further. And frankly, we'll be looking for ways not to increase it, but to decrease it. So we've got a major challenge here. The school board has their own challenges with this, and obviously that's theirs to handle and with the superintendent. But everybody's got to look for ways to do more with less and get a better outcome. And that's true across the board. And I would urge everybody involved to look for ways to do that, because that's the kind of environment that we're in.
I would like to push back on that, though. I feel like as historically schools, we've been asked to do more with less every single year, and it gets more and more difficult. Our schools are so far behind in funding renovations and building new schools. My school has been referred to as like Trailer City because we have so many trailers at my school. We barely have enough bathrooms for all of our students. We have a trailer bathroom at my school where students have to use a key to get inside the bathroom because I'm in a trailer that isn't connected to a main building area that has access to water fountains, bathrooms, things like that. And I also would like to say that I hope that you will, push for, the diversified funding that was mentioned earlier in the presentation. I believe it was the food and beverage tax. And then also, I know that there is additional funding coming from the state. While it's not as much as we would like, there is more, and teachers did do a lot to push for those things and to talk to our Congress members and our representatives at the state government's office. And so I really urge you to honor the collective bargaining agreement that was made in good faith with FCPS staff, just like you are honoring the collective bargaining agreements already made with police and firefighters. Thank you.
I would just ask, Mr. Dunne, is there anything you want to respond to that question or comment?
No, I believe I shared my comments, but certainly making sure that we're fully funding the salary increases is a priority. But Mr. Stork is correct that we need the state, we need the federal government to step up and pay their fair share, because we have many people living on fixed incomes and many people facing the prospect of layoffs. And so we do need to be sensitive to that as well. So it's a difficult balancing act.
Thank you. Next, Emily Vanderhoff.
Thank you. Hi, Supervisor Stork, Mr. Dunne, Emily Vanderhoff. I'm a teacher in FCPS, proud member of my union, FCFT. Going to be the president-elect of my union, going to be starting in July. I'm just going to echo my union colleagues as well, who have spoken already about our very deep concern and disappointment about seeing less than half of this contract that we have negotiated being funded. And just to kind of set the stage, you know, it's been almost 50 years that collective bargaining had been outlawed by state law in Virginia. It's been a long road to get to this point. We've been bringing people along, people who have, you know, been so disappointed, ready to leave education. It's a hard field to be in. And we have been carrying people along saying things will be different when we get our contract. And here we are, we have negotiated our contract. It has taken so much to get to this point. The contract we've negotiated is very limited in scope, but the one priority that we focus on, which was cut down pretty significantly from where we initially started the discussions, is the 7% compensation increase. That's going to make it so that we can really have the best public schools in the region, the best paid employee, not even the best, second best, as the presentation said, the second best paid employees in the region, attract and retain the very best for the children of Fairfax County. And so to see this budget presentation yesterday at less than half of the funding required to meet that 7% is really a slap in the face to all FCPS employees and to, frankly, the families whose children attend our schools and are going to see a massive people leaving our district when we finally reached this point and said we have a contract, and now we can't even rely on these negotiated contracts, negotiating good faith, as Ms. Robles says, with our district. I know that you said that.
Ms. Vanderhoff, thank you very much for your comments. Do you have a specific question?
I do.
I just could please ask it.
So a few questions I have. So the 51.5% going to the schools in this is a reduction. It's the same as last year, but there's been a trend of reduction from the 52.6 or 52.7%. That's been the longstanding average in FCPS, and then also below the statewide average of 52% in a county transfer. And so is that something that Mr. Stork, that you're intending to improve upon, especially knowing that we have this negotiated contract? And then also, I want to make sure I understand. So if, I'll ask this question offline, but then a second thing that I wanted to ask about is that the meals tax. I want to hear from you, Mr. Stork, about, will you be advocating to do the meals tax, not to replace the real estate tax, but to add on so that we can begin to fund these unfunded negotiated contracts that we have? Thank you.
Yeah, and you won't hear any commitment from me tonight about meals tax, non-meals tax. It's how do we get to a budget that we think is difficult but still doable and long-term keeps us competitive and attractive to folks from around the country. So I know our schools are a key part of that, but I also know our tax rate, our police force, our fire. There's so many elements of that are key parts of that. So that's what this process is about. That's what I'll be listening for, particularly tuned into Mount Vernon residents and how they see the balance for this budget working out as we go through this process. We have a couple months of this process to go, and I assure you I'll be very involved, and I'm sure hearing a lot from everyone about it.
Okay.
I just wanted to say quickly, if I may, first of all, I appreciate the collective bargaining agreement, the speed with which it was negotiated, and to rectify certain issues beyond salaries, but also to ensure that our salaries are in alignment so that our hardworking FCPS employees can get paid market wages. But I also wanted to say that the school board is very focused on engaging with the county to come into strategic alignment so that perhaps if the boards can reach agreement, some percentage can be reached as kind of an informal agreement so that going forward, the schools will be able to better plan as they look to the future, rather than every year putting out a budget that's X and then it ends up being Y, which plays with people's expectations. So I think the boards are committed to working together in that regard. I don't know if they'll be able to reach agreement, but that is something we're working towards, so then we can make better commitments to our staff and make sure that they understand what the future is and keep those promises that get made.
Okay, Mr. Rumberger, you're up next. You are still on mute.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and thank you for hosting the budget session this evening. Couple of questions. Page 53 of the budget document, can either Mr. Hagan or Mr. LaHaye explain what under Agency 90 is happening with the Lorton Police Station? I couldn't understand the word salad in the explanation. Page 53.
Yep, pardon, pulling up the document right now.
So essentially what's happening with our police department right now is we are having trouble filling all the positions that we have. With the opening of the Lorton Police Station, the intent would have been to staff up the police station to have more police officers overall. Just with the recruitment challenges that we've had, we have not been able to get to that full staffing. So the proposal here would be that essentially you as a citizen going into Lorton Police Station, there'd still be a front desk presence, certainly the animal shelter still running there. And so I don't think that you as a resident going into that station are going to see a difference. There's also not going to be any difference as far as the actual staffing of the patrol areas. And so what we have here is a just change in the model to kind of continue to have that presence at Lorton, but not having that full command staff at this point there. Still having a presence there so that you have that kind of front desk support, but recognizing the challenges that we're having with recruitment, recognizing the fact that it's going to take us a while to get to that point where we're able to staff up. Right now with the retirements and overall challenges that we're having in the police force, we're still just trying to get to the point where we're able to start making progress on filling those seats and getting up to the staffing that we want to have.
So through fiscal year 2026, it will still only be open from 8 to 6 p.m. And there'll be no parking enforcement officer there or anything else, correct?
I'm not sure on all the complete operational details on that, to be able to answer you on that.
Okay.
So, Mr. Rummer, before you get to your next question, I just wanted to mention that hours are 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m.
Yeah.
And Supervisor Stork, I don't know if you want to.
Is that 5 days a week or 7 days a week, Ms. Moore?
That's 7 days a week.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I could continue. If I understand reading the budget document, there are going to be no crossing guards at high schools. Will every high school have the speed cameras both ways?
I know that there are the continued implementation of speed cameras within school zones. I don't know that I can guarantee that there'll actually be speed cameras at every high school. I'm not sure where we are with that program at this point.
So we removed the crossing guards, and we still don't know how many high schools will have speed cameras going both ways.
Is there anybody from FCPS that can
Yes.
address that question?
I don't think we removed the crossing guards, just to clarify. There was an issue last year with and maybe the county staff can speak to this better, but an effort to see if FCPS could assume the management of the school crossing guard program. That was declined by the superintendent, so I think that's been resolved. I think there's still an issue outstanding that there's vacancies, too many vacancies for school crossing guards, and I don't know if that's funding or just hard to hire as it is with school bus drivers, but I'm not aware of any situation with school crossing guards being replaced by cameras. I think it's a supplement, and the data that's been shared with me historically is that it's been effective in slowing people down on those roads, but
Correct.
it's not intended to be a profit generator. It's intended to just pay for itself over time.
Thank you. I'll double check. I'm
Mr.
sorry, go
Dunne,
ahead.
Mr. Dunne, I think Mr. Rumberger is referring to one of the reductions, one of the $60 million reductions is removing crossing guards at all high schools in the county budget. That's what Mr. Rumberger is referring
Yes.
to.
Thank you.
I apologize. I had not seen that. That would be something I would oppose.
Thank you. Page 56, looking at agency 92, we're removing $5.6 million worth of overtime for fire and rescue on one of the county cuts recommended.
Yes. So essentially this here is recognizing the fact that with fire department, we have had gains with recruitment and retention. And so here, this is attempting really to match what we expect to need to spend here within overtime.
Exactly. What you're taking out, you'll be able to staff fully. Got it. Understood. Along that line, Company 416 Clifton, 441 Cross Point, Rescue 419 Lorton, and Ambulance 420 Gunston. Those are all listed as cuts in the county budget. Does any other region representing our area here in the South County area have that many reductions in emergency services in the county?
Yep. So, certainly with these cuts, this is the department taking a look at their staffing, taking a look at where they need the units based on the calls they're getting, based on response times. I know this is certainly something that's going to get some interest, and that we'll be getting some stats out from the fire department regarding what this staffing model is going to look at. But this is certainly a recommendation that came forward from the fire department for how they can more efficiently deploy the manpower that they have in order to be able to make sure that they're able to still provide the services that I know that all of our county residents expect, but in a more efficient manner.
So this actually came promulgated from the fire services, correct?
I mean, certainly as we look at all of these reductions, we started this out with a overall directive from the county executive for agencies to come forward with reductions totaling 10% of their budgets. And so agencies, certainly worked through coming up with what those are. We had a full range of options that came forward, especially after the efficiencies and cost savings that we took last year, the $34 million that Katie mentioned and cuts that we took last year. The options that came forward this year were certainly more difficult. And I think you're seeing this here, and certainly with your reaction to a number of them, you're seeing the fact that many of these are more difficult reductions that we're taking a look at this year. Certainly, what we focused on were those that the agencies were telling us were going to have less of an impact on the services that they provide, and really trying to prioritize them that way while still, really this is a balancing act against the overall impact on the homeowner and on the taxpayer, and making sure that we can keep that in check. So yes, all these reductions are options that came forward from the agencies, things that they worked through and things that, they thought were going to be the things that had the least impact on their services, especially when it comes to fire department here.
Okay, just going to share as a Lorton taxpayer for 35 years and a county taxpayer for 48. I find kind of egregious that there are 4 hits in one geographical area, and there's not another geographical area that takes that many reductions. I would say if you're going to do something like that, that needs to be spread out more evenly across the entire county. Lastly, page 62. Agenda, I think it's agency 97. We're closing 2 residential treatment facilities. Is that correct? Did I read that right?
So that would be in CSB. So we would proposing to close Cornerstones and New Generations, but we have other facilities that are available that would accommodate those individuals who are currently at Cornerstones or New Generations. So they wouldn't be losing services. They would be just transferring to a different service option within the CSB.
So this is a loss of beds, but not a lot of loss of services, right?
Right. So the individuals would be transferred to open beds currently.
Okay, and so there are open beds for that.
That's my understanding, yes. So they would be accommodated, right?
Okay.
Now, certainly if there's a significant increase in demand all of a sudden, right?
We're not going to liquidate those properties and sell them off private or anything else like that. They'll still be available should we have anything. I mean, there's a bit of a fentanyl crisis going on, and so I'd like to see that those are still available.
And staff are working on that. I mean, the board directed the CSB to look at a residential facility for youth struggling with fentanyl addiction. So they are actively pursuing that. So this in part was to help accommodate that recommendation or that edict from the board, is to be able to move forward with that.
Thank you, Mr. Rumberger. We have to move on to our next set of questions. Erin, thank you for your patience. You are up next.
Thank you. My name is Erin Scanlon. I live in the Mount Vernon district, and I am the parent to second grade twins. I'm also a 20-year Fairfax County teacher, and my husband is a school administrator. So I know we've heard a lot from teachers tonight about how disappointed we are with the school lack of funding for the school budget. And I'm not as well spoken as those women are, but just to break it down of what I've seen in my 20 years in the county. When I came into the county, I would sit in, a few years in, they would call me into interviews. I would sit in on an 8-person interview where we were looking at applicants where there'd be 15, 20 applicants for one position. Mm-hmm. And now I sit in these interviews and it's me and the assistant principal, and we are begging people to come into our school, begging. I'm extremely concerned for my children. They're in second grade. We have years left of their schooling. I'm concerned of who's going to be teaching them, who's going to be in our county with our children, giving them this world-class education. So I know that we said that, you know, this is the biggest increase that we have ever asked for, the school board has ever asked for teachers, but we are in a dire situation. I've been in the schools for 20 years. I'm friends with the parents in my community. People are concerned about the quality of the teachers in the schools. The teachers are leaving. I have friends that have taught for 20 years. They're not to retirement yet, and they're moving to other professions because they don't make enough money to live in the county. So like I said, I'm not as well spoken as these other people. I'm just telling you what I've seen, and I'm extremely concerned for my second graders that are going to go all the way through high school at South County, at who's going to be teaching them, where are these teachers coming from, what are their credentials.
Ms. Scanlon, do you have a question?
I do, and I will get to it. I'm sorry, I get nervous in front of all these
that's okay.
people.
I know you're passionate.
Give me two more minutes. When these highly qualified teachers are leaving Fairfax County, we have less of a support system for these new people that are coming in, and it affects our children's education. It affects my children's education, and that's what I'm nervous about. I'm uncomfortable. So I know it's a huge ask to find this money from somewhere, but I'm begging you for my children, for my students, for my neighbors, that we find this money and we make this a top priority. So I know that Mr. Stork said he doesn't want to say where he's going to put this, where he's going to put this food tax. What ideas do you have? And Mr. Stork, just so you know, my husband worked with your wife at Hybla Valley. We have been a part of this community for years, and we want the best for it. And we feel like we need to invest in our teachers and our children. So Mr. Stork, how can Fairfax County do something for the teachers to keep the best teachers here with our children?
I would say it's an all of the above strategy, meaning that we all have to have our elbows on the table. There's no doubt that the county's going to have to look at what else can we do? How else do we do it? And where is it going to come from? Because we literally are the highest cost area in our region, and that's not what we want to be longer term. So how do we manage that? How do we get other funding sources, revenue sources, et cetera? That's clearly part of this conversation, part of what, I'm chair of the Economic Development Committee for the board, and we've had a number of meetings lately where that's have been a major part of our focus. How do we get additional tax revenue to fund the things that we all care deeply about and desperately want? On the school board side, they're going to have to also take a deep look at what they're doing and where do they really have to spend money and where can they maybe do something different. I'm not on the school board now, and I'm not here to tell them what to do because I deeply believe in the separation of the Board of Supervisors and the school board. I respect that the school board will make the operational decisions with the money and the budget that they have. So I think it's an all the above approach. We need to get everybody to be taking a much harder, longer, deeper look at where we spend our money and where we have extra, steps that we don't need, where we can flatten organizations and save money on more managers or supervisors, et cetera. I just the other day, I spoke directly about that with our police force and why I think we can do some things there. But I'm not here to speak for the schools. I am here to speak for the county. We have a major challenge in front of us. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I know that I can't imagine that the budget request that the superintendent made will be close to being fully funded. It's the second year in a row that there's been just a significant increase proposed. And it's just, we're not in that position as a county where we have those options and opportunities. So we're gonna have to find out where do we put our dollars and where they're gonna make the most difference, whether it's schools or teachers or, or some other place or raise taxes that will hurt the least. So those are the challenges, and that's the process that we're going to be going through over the next couple of months.
Thank you. I beg you to put the students first, and by putting the students first, you're going to put keeping good teachers in our classrooms, finding a way to make that like a top priority. That's what I ask.
Thank you. Wendy, Ms. Henley, you're up next.
All right. I'm looking at page 49, agency 79, and I'm not sure who this question goes to, but it's in reference to eliminating the middle school after school program across
alluded to. And this obviously is one of them. In looking at it, it was determined that there were other programs that were not more important to cut, but there were other after-school activities at the schools that the children could participate in. So maybe this one wasn't as utilized as much as those other after-school programs. We also have a very strong network of community centers with after-school programming that they can participate in and encourage them to participate in. And yeah, but this is definitely one of those reductions that's a hard reduction to take. There's no doubt about that.
So did FCPS present this as one of the reductions?
So this is from our department. So like Phil said, all of the reductions started at the department level. The departments were asked to come forth with a 10% reduction target. They did that. They presented it to the budget, and then we spent months not only working with the agencies, but working with the county executive and our deputy county executives on going through the reductions and coming up with a proposal, to balance the program side of reductions along with the tax rate increase at the 1.5 cent that we proposed. So it was a lengthy process. It did start and was initiated at the department level.
Okay, and I just have one more question, and it's regarding the JLARC study, and pretty much everyone understands that in the, I believe it's 2023 JLARC study, it showed that our schools were $568 million underfunded. So I cannot be mad at Supervisor Reed for requesting $268 million county transfer to highlight the underfunding of the school. And I guess my question is, at what point is it the county executive that stands up and say, hey, how do we get this money back? Let's put this into action to level set this, because this has been an ongoing issue. How do we recover the funds that we're $500 million underfunded? Anybody?
I'm not sure that the best way to answer that is probably what I've been saying in general. Maybe there's something more I can clarify, but county executive put his budget out there with all that you see, and I frankly haven't even been through it all yet because it just came out and et cetera. But that's what I'm focused on over particularly the next couple of weeks. I have budget questions and such that I'm going to be looking for answers. But I would just say this: I mean, as most of you know, I was on the school board for 12 years, and now I've been in this job for about 10. And I don't remember a year where I didn't feel on the school board and for sure that there wasn't additional funding that the schools needed. I'm not saying that's not a criticism. It's just the needs are always more than what maybe we can afford, or we have to find other ways to fund them. So I don't see that changing, and that's not a criticism. It's just a reality. The job that we have on the Board of Supervisors is how do we kind of, again, square that peg in a round hole or whatever. And that's really what the county executive, his was the first his is the first thing out of the gate. And here's what he's saying it is. The board then has options that he's presented. We have every option on the table. We could go back and say, let's cut this more, or let's increase this tax more. I mean, we have clearly all those options, but and the good news is we have a couple months to try to figure that out. But it's historically the budget that you see in front of you that the county executive has presented doesn't change radically on the way to approval. There's sometimes additional dollars that are found. There's been additional cuts. So that's really the process that we're now engaged in. And as I've said to all my colleagues, we need to take our own deep dive, and I urge the school board, my school colleagues, to do the same, because we need what Mateo mentioned earlier. We need the federal government to do what they said they were going to do decades ago, which is to fund special education at 40%, and they fund it for less than 10%. We need the state to at least be in the average of what state governments pay and provide, versus being in the 95th percentile, meaning they're one of the lowest states to fund education. I'm on the state Virginia Association of County Board, and I go to meetings around the state. And there's counties in the rural part of the state that get 70% of their funding from the state, but their tax rates are maybe half of ours. I mean, so there's something not right, and the state's had billions of dollars surplus for the last couple of years. So all I'm saying is that we all have challenges here, and we should not just look at the county as the sole focus of solving this problem. It's going to take all of us, school, state, and theoretically federal, although I think none of us at the moment have much hope for that. So I don't know if that answered your question or if that was got us in the right direction or not.
So Dan, I appreciate that. However, I don't think this is a county issue. I'm just putting it up there. I know it's a state issue, but at some point the county has to, and I don't know if you have or haven't, has to, say, hey, we have to level set this. When do we get our funding back? And whether that's a state senator issue or delegate, I'm not sure, but this just didn't happen overnight that we are underfunded at the depth of where we are right now. That just didn't happen. So there are corrective actions that has to be taken. It's a collaborative effort, and it, the hard doing the hard thing is hard, so those are conversations that have to be made. But here again, I just want to bring that up because I don't want to gloss it over, saying, yeah, we're underfunded and, just that's life. That's not life. We need to do something definitive to correct that. So thank you all. And I just want to thank the teachers that spoke up. I applaud you, and I'm with you all the way. Thank you all.
Sorry, if I may just add a quick point. I just wanted to mention that, the county, I believe, but I can be corrected if I am misunderstanding, has enacted 10% cut across the board in many of the divisions of the county, if not all. And they're seeking to achieve higher pay by increasing the efficiency of their operations. And we see that in the private sector when labor costs go up, for example, increases in the minimum wage, businesses still have to compete to maintain their sales or increase their sales. So they find, increased automation in their operations, if it's a restaurant, or other efficiencies that can be gained regardless of the business. FCPS has to take a similar approach. If we want to free up dollars for increasing teacher salaries and support staff salaries, we can't just look to more taxes. We also have to look at more efficiencies. And I think there are efficiencies to be gained. It's not necessarily a bloated system or a lot of waste, but there are efficiencies that can always be gained. And especially with AI and other systems, there are labor efficiencies that can be realized, and that would allow us, again, to have more dollars and model our behavior on the county so that we can meet employee expectations for pay.
I just want to jump in, not to take away any of the points that you just made, Mr. Dunne, but the just to be clear, the county reduction exercise, we asked for 10% cuts from every agency, and certainly that's what we received from the agency as far as options. When we went through those options, there were quite a number that we didn't feel were things that we could implement. And what we ended up with and what's included in the budget, this nearly $60 million equates to about 3.4% of our agency budgets. So certainly there are a lot of things that we did not take that were not things that we thought were feasible and not acceptable to the community.
Thank you, Phil. We have one last question from Mr. Martin, and then when that gets answered, Supervisor Stork and Mr. Dunne will wrap up tonight's meeting. Thank you to everybody who's been staying on. Mr. Martin? And you're on mute, sir.
Still on mute. I don't know.
Did we lose him?
No, he's still on here.
No, how about now?
There we go. All right,
There
you're
we
good.
Okay, I wanted to follow up on the question about the ambulances because I'm just not sure I understand the language. I'm speaking largely on behalf of the Mason Neck Citizens Association, since I'm on the board there, about ambulance 420 at Gunston. And so it says, all right, redirect personnel to peak. So that's the advanced life support ambulance, I assume that we're talking about, because this is what we'd heard before. But the change will transition the unit from being staffed 24 hours a day to begin. I'm not sure I understand what it means here. The ambulance is gone. Is that what's, and then are you also then staffing it only during peak call hours, or is that for North Point? That was not clear to me. So it's on, on page 56, eliminating ambulance 420 Gunston and medic 439 North Point, and redirect personnel to peak staffing chase cars. This change will transition the unit from being staffed 24 hours a day to being operational during peak call times. So I'm not sure how much.
Yeah. I mean, why don't we do this?
Are you
Why
able
don't
to
we
answer
get,
that?
yeah, why don't we get clarification for you so we don't give you the wrong answer? And then we can provide that, Christine, to you, and then you can maybe pass it along. Does that work?
Okay.
Yeah,
That
and
works.
then the thing that goes along with that is, where would the service for Gunston come from? Where would the ambulance service from Gunston come from? And we're concerned because we have a fairly large, we're spread out. Mason Neck is very spread out, and there's a lot of aging people here. But so I want to know, if it's not going to be coming from there, where is the ambulance going to come from?
And certainly, as Katie said, we'll get specifics on Gunston for you. I'll say overall with these the fire staffing changes, where you see the peak staffing, a lot of the idea here is that they really do have that period during the day, and it's when we are all awake, when we're driving around, when we're cooking, when we're doing all these things that are potentially causing injury, where they really do have more calls, and that's also when it takes them longer to get anywhere because all of us are out on the road, congesting the roads and making it harder for them to get to them. We have a 24-hour staffing model where our firefighters are working 24-hour shifts right now. And there's certainly the periods during the night when we still need fire and rescue coverage, but it's certainly not the volume of calls, and it's certainly not the same travel times. And so they're really trying to look at this from the perspective of, what can we do in order to really right size that and make sure that we are staffing at the right times of the day? The other aspect of this as well is that we're seeing that there are fire and rescue personnel who would actually prefer a different schedule than a 24-hour shift, that they would actually like to work a daytime shift based on family needs, based on whatever it may be. That's just their preference. And so this is also something that they're looking at in order to accommodate really those desires of the workforce. I'll say overall with our fire department, I'm sure you've seen where if there is a medical issue, you might see a truck roll up, potentially getting to the scene before an ambulance. We do have that all hazards model, and so certainly the fire and rescue personnel who are on that truck are able to at least provide basic life support. Depending on who's on that truck, they might be able to provide advance, but certainly there's still that immediate response that happens with that. And certainly the staffing model is looking to, just again, make sure that we are staffing to the peaks within areas where they think that it is feasible and that they'll still be able to provide adequate responses. But certainly, as Katie said, we will get you some details about Gunston in particular.
Thank you.
And then, Christine, you had one question in the chat on the Innovation Fund. I can answer that just really quickly. It has to do
real
with
quick.
Our most recent pilot program was the Guaranteed Basic Income, which we used our federal stimulus dollars to actually make those payments. But our administrative costs came from the Innovation Fund.
Okay, thank you. And I think all the questions in the chat have been answered. We did have one that was very specific, and so we've gotten that already in email and have shared that with Joe, Phil, and Katie, and we have your email, and we will respond back to you on that. We've also been asked about recording. This has been recorded, and it will be posted to Supervisor Stork's video page, and we will send that out in our one of our regular email updates so that folks know where to go to find it. So we are right at 8:44, and Supervisor Stork and Mr. Dunne will wrap this up.
Mateo, you want to start and then I'll finish?
Sure. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for your advocacy, especially the educators and staff, and look forward to working with the community to try to meet the expectations within the limits of our budget realities and provide the greatest possible salary increase to our teachers and staff.
Thank you, Mateo, and I would share that from my perspective as well. And every year is a different kind of challenge with budgets. This one is, we know in essence where the buck stops. It stops with Mateo and I and the boards that we sit on. And how can we be more creative? How can we do a better job of focusing the dollars where they're most, if you will, critical, valuable, important, and find ways to reduce it in those areas which aren't as essential and can be if you will, not continued. And that's a core part of what all of our responsibilities are. And every single administrator, whether it's a superintendent or the county executive, in my mind, has those responsibilities for the respective agencies. So they all get to do their thing. And now, if you will, the board will do its thing and ultimately put together something that we hope will find the happy medium. And in this budget year, I don't think there's going to be a very happy medium. It's going to be, maybe we can get to a satisfying or a satisfactory medium. I think that's probably about as good as we can do, given the hands that we've been dealt by the federal government, and I would say particularly the state government. With the surpluses that they've decided to spend it in other areas, and that would have made a huge difference for all of us to start the pay down on the JLARC study, and some of the hundreds of millions that I think that we all, I think, recognize, and even state level folks recognize is important for our schools and ultimately very important for our communities. So we have another one of these and next Tuesday, and it will be essentially the same format, same process. So I wouldn't think that anybody would necessarily need to come, but you're more than welcome to come again if you want. And again, our focus will be on schools and county budgets and our Mount Vernon district residents, making sure we can answer those questions. And as a last point, we have a Q&A session or section that's open to everybody. And those Q&A questions get to some very, very nitty gritty, very finite, small points. And that is something that everybody here can access, and you will see all the information that I see. And again, next Tuesday, we'll also have a joint meeting of the school board and the board of supervisors at 3:00 in the afternoon, and you're welcome to tune into that meeting as well. So with that, I thank everybody. I deeply appreciate our public servants that are on here, teachers and firefighters and police, and really, as well as the taxpayers in Fairfax County who have helped to make all that possible and frankly give us, in my mind, still the best county in the country to live in. So have a great evening. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.